just finishing off Matt's wiring loom for the Skyline. So you can see there's the red and blue connectors for the LS1 PCM. They use this PCM for a number of different vehicles in the GM lineup. So they sort of mark them with these red and blue tags. The only thing is you have to remove that to actually access the pins, because I remove pins that don't need to be there and sometimes add other pins. So that's why it's got red and blue written on it, because once you pull them out, you don't know what colour it is. So it's good practice. You can see I've added a OBD connector there. That's off a Subaru, because I have Subaru wiring looms lying around, but they're all the same, so that doesn't matter. So that's our communication, so we can tune it and interrogate it. Come along a bit further. You see those big red wires, that's for the fan. I've integrated the fan wiring into the main engine harness just to make it a bit neater. So that'll connect inside the car to the fuse box. That Deutsch connector will also connect to the fuse box. And there's a few other wires there that will connect to the vehicle. As we run down the line, we can see that's the end of the fan wiring right there. 2 fans. That's your sort of throttle body area, so that pretty much just reaches across to the radiator to link up. See a bit of heat-proof sheathing on there. That's the water temperature sensor. It tends to get a bit hammered by the exhaust manifolds, so I just threw a bit of that on it. With these LS1 looms, they're getting pretty old now, so quite often they do have damage to them. This one was actually pretty good, but mostly they've got cracked wiring and that sort of thing. So just keep that in mind. It pays to have some spare pins to replace, particularly these around the throttle body seem to get hammered, and also sometimes the crank angle sensors. There's a lot of heat in the engine bay. There's a laptop with the wiring diagrams open. These ECUs are really simple. They're so easy to wire up. I'm a big fan of them in that regard. Here we've got a little link that heads off to the driver's side wiring loom of the car. That's just got the starter motor and the reverse light wires in it. So that's sort of the easiest way to link it up with the vehicle. I've stripped out the driver's side and front of car wiring loom off the R32 because it had about 10,000 things in it that no longer exist. So I pulled the entire thing apart and stripped out everything that didn't need to be there, and taped it back up again to neaten it up. Any other additive I've also put in there is that, which is your GFB G-Boost, G-Force boost controller. So I just integrated that in the loom as well, so just keeps everything neat if it's all in one loom. It's all part of the engine wiring, so there's no reason not to keep it together. So I'm about to tape that up in the cloth tape that I like, and then we're going to refit it to the engine. And when we get some fuel, we might be able to fire the engine up, which will be very good because it's been a while.
Al has wrapped the wiring loom in cloth tape and is fitting it to the car. The ECU plugs go out through the passenger side of the engine bay and enter the cabin via another hole in the wheel arch. Al connects all of the necessary plugs to the engine, and once he's done, he can get started on plumbing the turbos with some coolant and oil lines. The cooling lines for the turbos are being made from Dash 6 100 series hose. The feed lines come from the steam ports at the top of the cylinder heads and return back into the radiator. Matt is making up some hard lines for the beginning of the oil drains, as the position of the turbos made it hard to fit a Dash 10 AN fitting in between the compressor, turbine housings and the body panels. The hard lines are tacked together and Al went to visit Old Cock and Shane to enjoy a lemon squash and have the hard lines silver soldered. Al finishes off the wiring for the twin Deschwerks fuel pumps and fits a gauge into the Go Fast Bits fuel pressure regulator. With the fuel system almost sorted, we're just about ready to start the car.
In the process of doing the fuel system on Matt's car here, I've found this bolted in behind here where these relays are. So I pulled it out and it's pretty haggard looking thing. It's got no name on it or anything, just some part numbers. So I figured it's probably no longer required since nothing in the car is Nissan run anymore. But we've just gone through the process of filling up the surge tank and the pump won't work in the tank. So we've checked all the power and everything. It's all got power everywhere. Ended up pulling it out thinking the pump was dead, and it's got no ground to the pump. So I plugged this back in and all of a sudden it works again. So this is like some sort of primitive bloody voltage control unit for the fuel pump that's controlled by the factory ECU that hasn't been in the car for a long time now. So I don't know whether the pump was ever getting full voltage or not, but it's good that we found stuff like this to get rid of to keep everything reliable. So we're still going to bin that, and all we're going to do with this pump assembly is that used to go to that wire there, which then went to this controller. So we're just going to ground it straight to the body, and it's got its own sort of ground. This whole bracket is grounded. So we're just going to bolt that on there, and that's what most pumps are like anyway. They just ground them to the bracket. So we'll do that and stick it back in. We might be able to get to filling up that surge tank and get this thing going. We fixed up that earth on the fuel pump and refitted it, and I just hot wired it on the relay. We went through this with the Fairlane. When you've got a surge tank, you must fill it up before you start the second pumps up, the main pumps. Otherwise, the surge tank will take a year to fill up properly and it won't work properly. So we've left the relays out here. So those two pumps aren't working under the car, the Deschwerks. The in-tank pump, we've just left it running, and it probably took 2 minutes to fill up this tank. So it's the thing, you've got to do it. You've got to fill up this tank first, and you'll hear when it fills up, you can hear it start pushing back into the main fuel tank, gurgling and carrying on. So that's done. So now we can introduce the big pumps under the car. Then we've got to go up the front and bleed out the air. Because it's a deadhead system, there's a little Schrader valve on the end of the LS fuel rail. It's for that reason. You just press it with your finger and it leaks out all the air, and then we'll go underneath the car and set the fuel pressure. We just put a gauge in there temporarily to do that. Once we've set it to 58 psi or 4 bar, that's what these things run. That's the set pressure they're supposed to have. Then we'll just pull that gauge back out and put a screw back in it. So relays back in, fire up the pumps, bleed the air, set the fuel pressure, and then we'll be almost ready to start her up. We've already cranked her over a bit to get a bit of oil circulating. Oil filter's full. We don't actually know whether it's got oil pressure yet because the ECU's got the only gauge on it. But you can normally hear it with an LS1. They rattle a bit when you start them up and then they go quiet, and that means it's all good. So let's do it. We had a couple of fuel leaks. We fixed them. That's what happens. So we're actually ready to try and start this thing for the first time, and I'm not joking, we haven't started it 3 times already. We do that sometimes, but not today. So let's have a crack. Hopefully it'll just fire up. Steering arm.
Next time on the Skid Factory, the catch cane is fitted, guards bolted on, and it's finally time for a test run.